Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather, this 26th day of February 2022. I'm David Percy. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got a high wind warning out for the southern panhandle tonight, especially Prince of Wales Island. Low pressure moving northward, active front should bring the winds up to 60 miles an hour in gusts from the south and southeast overnight tonight. Otherwise, there's a winter weather advisory continues out for St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait coast tonight. Continued windy conditions, maybe a couple more inches of snow there, winds gusting 50 plus miles per hour. And but those winds should begin to slowly subside, especially after midnight tonight, and then the advisory should end by 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And on the satellite, you can see the swirl of clouds there moving westward in toward the Russian coast. That's what's bringing the strong winds and whiteout conditions, low visibility snow to St. Lawrence Island today. Savunga having visibilities quarter mile or less the entire day, with winds gusting to 55 miles an hour out of the east and southeast, with heavy snow reported throughout much of the day into the afternoon today. But you can see just to the east there, clearing out, thinner clouds. Seward Peninsula, some clearing, temperatures going above freezing. Clear skies reported at Tin City, gusts to 45 miles an hour and temperature up to 35 degrees there. And also clearing out over the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island up into the upper 40s this afternoon in sunshine, and west winds 10 to 20 miles an hour or so. Also breaking out to some sunshine showing up in the Kenai Peninsula and over the northern Kuskokwim Valley as well, behind that band of clouds extending from the Arctic coast there right down into the central interior around Tanana to Fairbanks, on into the Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound. And off the panhandle there, you can see low pressure developing. Actually several lows there, one west-southwest of the central coast of the panhandle, another one farther to the south that'll be moving up, bringing the stronger winds in tonight. Having a fair amount of precipitation occurring there over the panhandle with that frontal boundary. Heidelberg picked about 2/3 of an inch of precipitation, 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Ketchikan about 3/10 of an inch. And winds gusting anywhere from 25 to 35 miles an hour, and those expected to increase tonight as that system tightens gradient up the front there and presses up toward the coastline. Otherwise, lighter amounts of precipitation up to the north, Juneau to Yakutat, although Valdez did pick up a quarter of an inch of rain today so far, quarter of an inch, with rain falling most all morning and into the afternoon today. Then some areas of light snow up over the central interior around the Koyukuk Valley, that tapering off as well, kind of hit and miss on the snow, more of a snow shower condition there. And then the strong winds, whiteout conditions up on the eastern Arctic coast there, but much lighter winds back to the west. And then that low center, 970 millibar low, tight gradient right across St. Lawrence Island for the blowing snow there. And even the gusty winds, but a lot better conditions in toward the Bering Strait coast there, Tin City, Wales, and Teller. And again, some clearing there over the southwest interior, also clearing over the Alaska Peninsula, as I mentioned. Kodiak seeing some partly sunny skies this afternoon, allowing temperatures up into the mid to upper 40s. And a lot of shower activity over the Aleutians. Wind's not too much of a problem. And for tonight, again, that low tracks pulls farther back to the west and northwest, and the front stays west of St. Lawrence Island now. And so winds and blowing snow gradually improve and diminish, as well as the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, the interior looking at variably to mostly cloudy skies, scattered snow showers possible anywhere from the Seward Peninsula through the central interior. Maybe more of a general area of light snow condition there from the 40-mile country down across Copper River Basin. Rain and snow along the panhandle. Again, the high wind warning out in the south coast, Prince of Wales Island tonight for those 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts. That'll be shifting north-northwestward tomorrow, and winds will really diminish there for the southern areas, but with the front still off the coast or along the coast, periods of rain or rain and snow all along the panhandle tomorrow. Strongest winds will be on the north coast, looking at small craft advisories, 30-knot winds there for the coastal water areas, rain and snow. North Gulf Coast, areas of light snow or snow showers, eastern and southeast interior from the Yukon River there down across the upper Tanana Valley into the Copper River Basin. Look for partly sunny skies, high pressure over the interior from the Arctic coast there right on down through the central part of the state into the Kuskokwim Valley, Cook Inlet, Bristol Bay looking pretty good. Another nice day for Kodiak Island. Variable clouds but dry. Scattered isolated snow showers along the west coast from Togiak Bay on up to Seward Peninsula. And maybe a dry day with much lighter winds, definitely lighter winds for St. Lawrence Island. Rain and snow showers over the eastern central Aleutians, and then some light rain slipping on up to the Alaska Peninsula. That 995 millibar low kind of moving up to that area. The bulk of the moisture, though, staying to the south through the day. And then for the Monday outlook, gale force winds, rain with the next system pushing into the western Aleutians, otherwise light snow in the central interior. Rain and snow showers, light winds for the southeast coast, pretty fair out west. Lows tonight below zero, northeast interior and the eastern Arctic coast, otherwise in the 20s to the southwest coast, lower 30s out over the Alaska Peninsula. Lows in the 30s for the Panhandle, highs tomorrow 40 to 45 for the southeast coast, 30 to 40 south central Alaska, lower 40s Kodiak Island, 15 to 25 central interior, 0 to 20 above for the Arctic coast. Followed by lows on Monday morning, about the same as what we'll see tomorrow morning. 25 to 30 south central Alaska, 5 below for the central Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather, pretty good north of the Brooks Range. VFR, North Slope Arctic coast. Some IFR, though, lingering over the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, marginal VFR south of the Brooks Range and south of the Yukon Flats, off to the east there, and then areas of IFR across southern Alaska and the swath from the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea, down across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta into the southern Kuskokwim, actually covering the Kuskokwim Valley, cutting off at the Alaska Range, but covering Bristol Bay, the Aleutian Range, and sweeping across southwest Kodiak Island, Sitkinak, and those areas. Also the Alaska Peninsula, Bering Sea, marginal VFR, Aleutians, marginal VFR, southeast interior, IFR, including northern Cook Inlet and most of the Kenai Peninsula, just about all the Kenai Peninsula actually, Prince William Sound, all of the southeast coast and Gulf of Alaska. And then for the afternoon, not much change, pretty good IFR except north of the Alaska Range now, up into the mid and upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. Marginal VFR just north of Eagle, but VFR, Yukon Flats, Kobuk, Koyukuk Valley on out to the central eastern Arctic coast. Still some IFR over toward Kaktovik, Barter Island. Then increasing marginal VFR in the western Arctic coast that extends all the way down to the lower Yukon River Valley and southward into the Kuskokwim Delta and Kuskokwim Valley. IFR along the western Alaska Range back down toward King Salmon, Dillingham, Togiak, Cape Newenham, and then eastern Bering, pretty much IFR from the Seward Peninsula there, Nome to St. Paul on down to the Alaska Peninsula. And some VFR breaking out tomorrow afternoon could mean some sunshine for the Aleutians, but mostly marginal for the remainder of the Bering Sea. And for Monday morning, VFR, Atka, Adak, IFR for the St. Lawrence Island area, St. Paul, St. George, southwest coast, inland, and Bristol Bay IFR, most of Kodiak Island. Fognak Island VFR, southern Cook Inlet, but Kenai Peninsula up to northern Cook Inlet, Manuscasitna Valley, eastward into most of the Copper River Basin IFR, Prince William Sound IFR, and then a narrowing band extending northwestward up into the central interior to the southern slopes of the central Brooks Range, VFR, north slope out to the Arctic coast, marginal VFR for the Panhandle. Monday afternoon, becoming VFR through northern three quarters of the southeast coast, IFR, southern areas. IFR west of Yakutat to Cordovan to Prince William Sound, and possibly Seward, Resurrection Bay. But south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, Manuscasitna Valley, marginal VFR, and most of the interior, especially the west side, west central interior up across Yukon River VFR, or marginal VFR to the Brooks Range, and then some VFR for the north slope and the Arctic coast. And a Tuvik VFR, Adigan, same forecast, looking good up north. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional IFR, a little bit better there at Rainy with marginal VFR. Windy, marginal VFR, but north entrance VFR. Isabel, IFR. Mentasta, IFR. Tanita, IFR. Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels at the surface, cutting and meandering across the central Bering Sea into Bristol Bay, up just north of Cook Inlet, and then eastward across the Copper River Basin, well north of the Panhandle, 2,000 feet across the southeast coast. And could be some areas of considerable moderate rime icing, but that shouldn't be too serious there for the Panhandle. And lighter icing threats for the northeastern North Gulf Coast and into the southeast interior. And some icing coming up from the south, just grazing the Alaska Peninsula. Then areas of mixed icing for the Aleutian Chain and southern Bering Sea. Jet stream, south-southeast flow, 70 to 75 knots at about 33,000 feet, right over west central Alaska. Real light winds now across the Panhandle and just about elsewhere. The main jet only 85 knots, but that's well south of the western Aleutians. 9,000 feet, 35 to 45 knots as that low continues to pull westward, taking the stronger winds westward with it, just clipping St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, 45 knotters there across the Panhandle with that low near Yakutat. And at 3,000 feet, that low center is a little bit farther to the south. Easterlies 50 knots just south of Yakutat, and diminishing southerly winds there over the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island. Pretty light everywhere else. Turbulence, not too bad, maybe light, occasional moderate chop, considerable moderate chop northern Panhandle. Otherwise, lessening turbulence for St. Lawrence Island, increasing turbulence for the western Aleutians.
When I first started working here in the early 90s, this is where the glacier was. I mean, where we're walking right now would have been a pile of gravel that had been pushed up by the glacier, and then we would have had 100 to 200 foot high cliffs of ice right here. And as you can see, that's changed quite a bit. And if you look at that in 2 dimensions, you can sort of see the terminus used to be here, now it's back there. That gives you one measure. What that kind of 2-dimensional look doesn't show is how much mass has been lost, that the glacier has just sort of deflated. These 200-foot cliffs of ice have disappeared and pulled back to this gentle sloping glacier you see now.
When I was working in Kenai Fjords National Park, I used the topographic maps to navigate where I was, and I realized that the mapping of the glaciers was really off. The glaciers had receded a lot. There were new rivers and lakes that were establishing where the ice used to be or should have been according to the maps. And so then I did a study on this and found out that we had a 5% loss of glacier ice mass in the Kenai Fjords area between 1950 and 1985. Big change.
You know, one of the most compelling things we do, though, to document glacier change is simply take photographs. We've had repeat photography projects here at the park. They may not give you the most accurate data in terms of how much mass or real specific measurements, but what they do give you is a visual representation that can't be argued with. I mean, it really requires no interpretation.
Understanding what's happening, understanding these processes, and possibly being able to predict what's going to happen in the future is the best that we can do, and that requires science and research.
There's considerable research on climate change in Alaska. The most significant, I would say right now, is the Natural Resources Inventory and Monitoring Program, which is looking at change across a wide variety of vital signs or indicators.
Kenai Fjords National Park is actually a pretty good representation of what's going on globally with regards to glacier ice retreat. There have been studies showing that mountain glaciers are retreating all over the planet. There are probably well over 90% of the glaciers are in retreat status. There are a few that are advancing, and some are holding their terminus point. But at Kenai Fjords, the tidewater glaciers are retreating more dramatically, but even the land-based glaciers in the terminus positions are retreating. It's pretty common for all the mountain glaciers. The big mountain glaciers in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, they're mostly in retreat too. We're really entering an interesting phase where what we call the cryosphere, the ice on the planet, is melting.
You know, in the more immediate past, it's clear that since the Pleistocene, glaciers have been retreating. So the idea that glaciers retreat is is no revelation. They've been retreating from across North America for the last 10,000 years. What appears to have changed and what has people's attention is the rate at which they're retreating. In the case of Exit Glacier, you know, we have scientists who've been looking at it. We have evidence that the glaciers left behind, where we can track that retreat for about the last 200 years. And we can say with confidence that in the last decade, that rate has increased.
Terminus mapping is a great way to map a small portion of the ice field. We come out twice a year and we use a GPS to walk the edge of the terminus and map the farthest extent of Exit Glacier. And that allows us to see what type of changes are occurring over the winter accumulation period and the summer ablation period. With that data, that can help us as we witness these changes within the ice field, we can hopefully be able to correlate that with the weather data that we have.
You know, when you look at an ice field that's 750 square miles, when you look at a glacier that towers hundreds of feet high, you get a sense of permanence. You think these things are massive, they're somehow a permanent sort of feature, and yet in a very short period of time, in a matter of a couple of decades, we've seen dramatic change in those things.
At Exit Glacier, we have a time-lapse camera set up on the glacier that allows us to take a couple photos every single day, and then to put that sequence of photos into a video where we can see changes of the glacier and the vegetation phenology throughout an entire year.
Virtually all the glaciers in Alaska are receding. Some glaciers are moving forward. That's not an indication that they're actually growing in size. It's just the rate at which they're slipping down the mountain.
In some cases, some of these glaciers are receding back up onto land, and so they're producing less ice. When you change the glacier systems, you're changing habitat for marine mammals and other wildlife. And the populations of harbor seals have dropped dramatically in the fjords. In 1980, shortly after the establishment of the park, in Island Bay, we had maybe 1,500 harbor seals. Nowadays, you know, it's a few hundred.
In Arctic environments, much of the sunlight that reaches the Earth bounces back because it hits snow and reflects off into space, or ice on the ocean and reflects off into space. That's the albedo effect. When the snow thaws and instead you have rock or vegetation, or when the ice thaws and you have transparent ocean, the sunlight will convert to other wavelengths. It'll convert essentially to warmth. That does not bounce back into the atmosphere as much. So consequently, you get a warming of the ocean, you get a warming of the ground, you get a thawing of frozen soils or permafrost, you get a more rapid thawing of sea ice. So once the ice and once the snow is off of the surface, the rate of warming increases considerably.
If you're driving out to Exit Glacier, you'll actually start to see signs along the side of the road that have dates on them. Visitors sometimes are confused. They think they're elevations or something until they get up to the glacier and realize, oh, those were all date signs along the road that were telling me when the glacier was there. Another thing that's been happening in the Exit Glacier area in recent years is this flooding that comes at a time we're not used to. We're used to having maybe some flooding in the fall when we have a lot of heavy rain. This has suddenly been some flooding that's coming in the middle of the summer, usually not associated with precipitation events. It's associated with warmer weather and melting. When you walk down one of our trails that leads to Exit Glacier, there are a number of ways to get out there, but what used to be the main route is no longer really the main route because of the way the glacier has changed. So this main route to the glacier used to provide dramatic views of the glacier as you walk towards it. In fact, there was a large kiosk built at the end of this trail for people to stop and rest and enjoy the view of the glacier. Now, if they stop and rest at this kiosk, people think, why did the park put a kiosk here? Because it looks out at some shrubs. there's no glacier within view anymore.
The way we solve big problems like this is not all at once. There's a thing called the Sokolov's wedges, and you just take a little bite of the pie, one sliver at a time. So we try to do incremental changes.
When we talk to people about our concerns about climate change, about the changes that are happening to the glacier, we also want to leave them with some idea of what we're doing to mitigate some of the effects of climate change. For example, here at the park, as we retire vehicles out of our fleet, we try to replace them with electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. We've done things like at the Glacier Nature Center, helping to sort of experiment and install a cutting-edge fuel cell, as opposed to running some traditional power source out there that relies on some sort of more greenhouse-producing gas.
My main hope for the future is that people get the message that the planet is changing fairly rapidly in places, particularly places like Kenai Fjords National Park, and that it is, we think, there's good evidence it's a result of atmospheric changes, which are measured in terms of human inputs into the atmosphere.
The rapid rate at which these glaciers are changing now offers us the opportunity to talk about this place as a way of looking into the future. In a lot of parts of the country, climate change issues are a little more subtle, and we can point here and say, look how fast this is changing. This is what the future holds for perhaps a lot of us and a lot of the planet as climate continues to change.
I'm optimistic that people and nature will adapt to change, but my expectation is that change will occur. Time will tell.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for the Panhandle coastal water forecast. Winds falling down to 15 knots from the south there on the south coast. Seas at around 16 feet. North coast, though, small craft advisory, south to southeast winds 30 knots. Seas around 17 feet. And 30 knot southeast winds over the southern inside waters as well. Seas with 11-foot seas. Stevens Passage, small craft advisory, southeast winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet. And as you head northwest, become a little more variable and swing around to the northwest at 20 knots through Lynn Canal with 4-foot seas. And for the day on Monday, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage, winds forecast north 20 knots with 4-foot seas. But gales are Clarence Strait, southeast winds 35 knots with 8-foot seas. On the south coast, small craft advisories, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, and north to northwest winds for the north coast of 15 knots with seas 7 to 9 feet. Prince William Sound, variable to northwest winds at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Cook Inlet, variable to north winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And for the eastern North Gulf Coast, looking at north winds at 20 knots, but variable winds at 10 knots for the western North Gulf Coast. Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, winds will be northwest at 15 knots. Light winds continue for Cook Inlet into Monday, variable to west winds or breezes at 10 knots with seas 2 feet or less. East winds 15 knots for Prince William Sound. North Gulf Coast, west winds 15 to 20 knots, seas just under 10 feet. And for the Kamishak Bay area, northwest winds at 15 knots. Barren Islands, light winds there, west at 15. Light variable winds tomorrow for the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty nice day wind-wise there. Seas 4 to 8 feet. And east winds at 10 knots for Bristol Bay. Also light variable winds from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. Shelikof Strait, light variable winds at 10 knots. East side of Kodiak Island, northwest breeze at 15 knots. And for Monday, west-southwest winds 15 knots for Kodiak Island. Otherwise, the Alaska Peninsula, winds stay light and variable at about 10 knots with seas running 3 to 7 feet. Bristol Bay, light northerlies at 10 knots. On Alaska Island tomorrow, variable winds at 10 knots, seas 4 to 9 feet. Unmak Island, west-southwest 15 knots. Picking up to 20 knots from the west for Adak and Atka. And then small craft advisories from Amchitka Island to Shimia for west winds at 25 knots. Then those increase to gales and spread eastward. During the afternoon, gale force winds should reach Atka Island at 40 knots from the southeast, and that'll extend back to Shemya, all southeast of 40 knots, seas 15 to 18 feet. Unmak Island, winds increasing in the afternoon to 30 knots from the south, and then Unalaska Island, west-southwest 15 to 20 knots. Southwest coast, south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots for the day Sunday. Purbloff, south 15. Small craft or brisk wind advisories. St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew Island for south winds at 25 to 30 knots. And then for Monday, Norton Sound, east winds 15 knots. St. Lawrence Island, south winds at 20 knots. And variable to northeast winds at 10 knots for the southwest coast. And the Purbloff, St. Paul, St. George Island, south at 15. St. Matthew Island, brisk wind advisories continue for southeast winds at 30 knots. Gale force winds still in the forecast tomorrow for the extreme eastern Arctic coast there, east 40 knots, otherwise brisk wind advisories out to the central coast for east winds 25 to 30 knots. Brisk wind advisories also from Cape Beaufort to Wales for southeast winds at 25 knots. That continues through Monday from Wales to Cape Beaufort, southeast 25 knot winds there, and southeast 15 for the western Arctic coast, and lightest winds will be on the central coast from the east at 10 knots, and then those winds increase to 30 knots from about Kaktovik Barter Island to Demarcation Point. For tonight, high wind warning out tonight for the southern panhandle, especially Prince of Wales Island, for winds gusting to 60 miles an hour as that low center tracks north and northwest and the front approaches the coastline. And conditions slowly improve, but wind weather advisory remains out St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. Maybe another 2 to 4 inches of snow, but gusty winds to 50 miles an hour, creating whiteout conditions. Conditions also improve over the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and become markedly improved tomorrow with dry conditions and mostly clear skies up that way. High pressure makes for a dry day with some sunshine over the central and southern interior into Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island once again. And then more snow in the interior on Monday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.